Hey everybody, my name is David Austin, and today I want to talk to you about integrated GraphQL. So, what is it exactly? Well, integrated GraphQL is something we can use in our JSON rendering components that affects the layout data that is sent to our front end components. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, if you're working with a data source whose template contains fields or more fields than you need, or maybe a field that contains a ton of data in it, like a rich text field, you're not using that in the component and you're trying to reduce the size of the data being sent to the front end, that might be a case that you want to use it. Or if you're building a component that requires additional fields, maybe the URL to the data source that you're actually pulling in, and you want to spare yourself having to call yet another GraphQL call within the front end component itself. Or maybe you just want to avoid using GraphQL client side if possible at all. Those are the cases when you'd want to use integrated GraphQL. I'm sure there's a multitude of others, but that's really the focus that we're going to focus on today. So let's walk through an example of when I'd want to use it. Well, welcome to another demo site that I've set up. This time it's about Star Wars. It's a site I recently featured in a talk for the Sitecore Headless Development User Group about attestation-driven front ends. But here I've built a component that has a placeholder on the right, allowing for authors to drag in cards using Pages or Experience Editor. Those cards are actually pages in the tree. We only care about a few of the fields on those items, though. In particular, the summary heading, the summary description, the summary image, and of course, the URL to the item in question. So in the back end, let's take a look at one of those pages. And out of the box, those fields I mentioned, minus the URL, would come automatically as part of the layout data. But these items are hiding a nasty surprise. Each one of these items has a content field that contains a large amount of rich text information. This field too would come along for the ride, increasing unnecessarily the size of the layout data being sent to our front end. So how do we solve that? Well, within our JSON rendering item, we can scroll down to the GraphQL section and open up the component GraphQL query field. Now, normally this field is empty, and I'd wager for the majority of your components and mine, it probably stays empty, which is totally fine. This field, though, has a ton of uses. We can take advantage of and work with things like the data source, the context, language if needed, and modify what the structure being sent to the front end looks like. In our case, we're adding in the URL to that item, and we're limiting the number of fields that are being sent back. Things like the heading, the description, and the image. Those are the only ones we care about. It's also important to note that rather than using value here, we want to use JSON value instead. This ensures that the authors can still work with the fields while in things like Sitecore Pages or Experience Editor. One of the simplest ways to validate your integrated GraphQL query is actually going to work is, of course, trying it out within the local Edge IDE. So we can simply take our exact query as we would have it, paste it right in here. In the query variables, we're going to give it a data source. So we're just going to copy in the GUID of the page that we're going to be using. And of course, obviously, keep our API key in there under the HTTP headers. And then we're going to hit play. We can see right away, we can see our image, we can see our summary description, our heading, our URL, of course, and nothing else, which tells us exactly the structure that we need our front end component to be. So let's go have a look at that. So, what does the front end code look like? How does it change? Well, the extent at which it changes, you have a bit of control over. But I'm going to primarily focus on the structure of the fields within the component props. On the left side here, you'll see what we used to have before using integrated GraphQL. And this is probably what a lot of your components look like by default. On the right, however, we have a slightly modified structure. And this is entirely due to the fact that the GraphQL on the back end is effectively performing a query for us. And now that query result is in place of that original structure. There are ways of streamlining this such that you could, in fact, keep the original structure by updating the getStaticProps function to effectively remap all these fields into the structure you need. I didn't go that far, largely because I'd have to re-add the URL anyways, so I just left it as it is. The best part here is because now I have the URL coming through, I no longer require a client-side GraphQL query to find out the URL to that item. It's already being passed through. So hopefully after this, you've learned a bit about integrated GraphQL and its uses, how easy it is to use, and maybe we'll even give you some ideas on improving the performance and efficiency of your front-end components. Pretty simple. Have a great day, everybody.